So here's the thing, it's been a whole month since we started back at school, which means it's been a whole month since we've been teaching in classrooms. And I wanted to share with you some of the things that I've been doing in my classroom since we got back. I posted an article at the beginning of the month which looked at the kind of tips and tricks to make sure that you can adapt what you're doing to the classroom. And I think, having been in the classroom for a month, it's all about adapting to new environments and adapting the kind of teaching that you're already doing and not reinventing the wheel. One of the key adaptations that I've noticed in the month that I've been teaching the classroom is how we go about separating the parts of the lesson. Whereas before, in the drama studio, we might have got straight into practical work as quick as we possibly could and started teaching key terminology whilst they were doing practical work. In the classroom, if you're allowed to do practical work, you can only do it for a very short period of time. And so for me, that has meant that I've separated out those different elements of learning and then applying. So quite a lot of my lessons now flow in this way. So we'll do some retrieval practice like we've done in the past. Then we'll go into a new phase, which is looking at the new learning for this lesson. Then we'll go into preparation for practical work, in which they are then applying the learning to a situation, which might be kind of writing their own performances for a devised piece or analysing and annotating a piece of script. And then at the end of that process, they will have their practical work. Now they've already done the preparation for that practical work. So now they've got a real intensive period of 10 or 15 minutes where they can get up and employ and action everything that they've thought about in their preparation phase. This is a lesson from Year 8. And the lesson starts straight off with some retrieval practice. 5 quick questions based on prior knowledge from the last 2 lessons. Then we move on to think about how we're going to build on that knowledge with what we're learning in this lesson. And this lesson is going to be focused on characterization, key terminology associated with that, and how we can use that to create a character which is central to creating a performance. With this one, we do a little bit of recap. So we go back over the context and the themes and the characters and the premise of Blood Brothers. They are not reading the whole play, they are working on extracts. So this is the kind of information that they really need to have so that they can move and work with the extracts quite carefully. Then the lesson goes into the next phase, which is starting that, looking at the new learning. And here we start with a question, which is, what is characterization? They think about it on their own, they share it with their partner, and then they share it as a class. And we move forward then to giving that definition of characterization, along with looking at these new terminology, the given circumstance, interpretation, and motivation. And I give them the definitions of those so they can work with them. Once they've got that knowledge of those 3 words, we then move into the second phase, which is preparing for practical. Whereas previously we might have gone into groups at this point and found a space in the drama studio, start acting it out, and then work on the given circumstance, interpretation and motivation as we go, we have to separate those 2 elements out. So next they go into this phase, which is preparing for practical work. So here they assign roles, they look for information about the given circumstances given to them by the author, they annotate the text looking for the characters' personality and how they interpret the character, and then we look for their character's motivation in the extract. All the way through this, I'm reminding them that they are going to use this information to help them in their practical work when they'll need to make decisions about how they are going to communicate that character's personality and their character's motivation to the audience through their voice and their movement and their proxemics and the use of stage space around them. So once they've done that, we then move into the practical phase. Obviously, with having a short amount of time available to do practical work, we need to make sure that the students are well prepped before that so they can then make as much of the time as possible. But there are limitations that they need to overcome themselves within the practical work. So they have to work in pairs with the person who is sat next to them. They have to wear face masks throughout the whole process, and they cannot have any physical contact at all. They have to work within the space that they have, which is between the two tables, the table in front of them and the table behind them. It may be that they perform in the space they're working in, or they might be able to perform at the front of the class. If different classrooms have different amounts of space and can't always allow groups to come out the front and perform because there's just not enough space. It's also important that I've set alternative work to be available because students might not have their mask, students might not feel comfortable with doing practical work. So throughout the whole term there will be alternative work for them to do. An obvious problem with the practical work is that the students are working in a small space between the desk and the desk behind them. You as the teacher cannot go between groups to be able to give feedback and give modelling as you go. In fact, you as the teacher have to stand right back at the back of the front of the classroom and observe across and see what everyone is doing. So you need to find a way of overcoming that obstacle of being able to give feedback to students without being able to go up to them. And this is what I've worked on so far, which is allowing them 5 or 10 minutes to get working. And in this time, I, as the teacher, stand back at the front of the class and observe each group. Take the time to watch each group work, hear what is being said if I can. Sometimes you can't because you're at the front of the class and they're all the way at the back of the class and they've got a mask on. So sometimes it's really hard to hear what they're saying, but you can certainly see what they're doing. And you can hear the groups that are closer to you. So it takes the time to observe each group, each pair within the rows going across the classroom, and then halfway through the practical work, stop everyone and give whole class feedback and whole class modelling. So see what the most problems are that all the students are coming up against, and then feedback to everyone on those, and then let them carry on with that improvement based on the whole class feedback that you've given. What I've noticed so far is that the work that the students are creating in that intense period of time is actually of much greater quality than what they were creating back in the drama studio. And actually, one other thing I've noticed about that is that all the students are creating something of good quality. Whereas before, back in the drama studio, everyone was so keen to get on and do practical work that they perhaps might not have listened, or perhaps might not have engaged with the theory work, the bit of key terminology, and just got on and started acting without making a connection between what they were doing and what they're trying to communicate to the audience, and just kind of have fun without the academic side of things. Whereas now, because we have to split the preparation from the practical, they are really spending a lot more time focusing on the work they are creating, the ideas that they're making, and the characters they're working on. And then when they get into their practical work, all of the work they are creating is much richer, much more developed than it was before.